The story begins in the golden glow of a suburban dinner party, where laughter clinks against the glasses of wine and polished silverware. James, Elena's husband, effortlessly holds the room in his hands. He compliments their neighbors with practiced charm, cracks tasteful jokes at just the right moment, and never forgets to pull out Elena's chair or refill her glass before she even realizes it's empty. To the outside world, he is the embodiment of a devoted husband, attentive, polite, magnetic. Their neighbors whisper about how lucky Elena must be, how she must wake every morning to the kind of marriage people envy but rarely find. Elena plays her part well, returning smiles, touching James's arm affectionately, nodding along as though she is the happiest woman in the room. But her eyes, if anyone cared enough to look closely, tell a different story. They flicker with hesitation when James brushes her hand, dim with something heavier when he praises her too perfectly. The illusion is airtight. James is the flawless man, Elena as his adored wife, and the marriage is something close to enviable perfection. Yet, beneath the warm light and well-practiced smiles, a quiet unease brews in her chest, a truth she cannot let slip into the carefully staged performance. When the last neighbor waves goodbye and the door clicks shut, the performance ends. The air in the room thickens as James's charm evaporates into silence, replaced by a cold indifference that feels sharper than any shout. He walks past Elena without a glance, loosening his tie, his face tightening into its truer shape. Then come the criticisms, precise and cutting. Her roast was too dry, her dress unflattering, her laughter loud when he was telling stories. Each remark is delivered with the detachment of someone discussing a flawed object, not a wife. The man who moments ago toasted to the woman who makes me the luckiest man alive now treats her as though she is nothing more than a disappointment. Elena says nothing, holding the weight of his words in silence. Has learned that defending herself only sharpens his tongue, that explaining or pleading only deepens the disdain in his eyes. So she swallows the ache, smoothing her expression into something neutral, careful not to reveal the fracture between his public affection and private contempt. This sharp contrast, James's shining public facade and his private cruelty, becomes Elena's prison. To the world, she is adored, envied, even admired for having what looks like an ideal marriage. To herself, she is alone, trapped in a silence no one would believe if she dared to speak it aloud. If she were to tell their friends that the man who gently kissed her hand at the dinner table later mocked her voice and tore down her confidence, they would dismiss her claims. After all, James is perfect, isn't he? He is the husband who opens doors, the man who never raises his voice in public, the one who hosts parties with flawless charm. Elena knows that in their eyes she would seem ungrateful, dramatic, maybe even unstable. So she hides the hurt, swallowing the bitterness as quietly as she smiled through their praise. This unspoken conflict, the world's version of her life versus the reality only she knows, becomes the emotional hook of her story. The audience sees the truth Elena cannot reveal, and in that space between admiration and hidden pain lies the tension that will drive the narrative forward. Elena was not always the quiet, carefully composed woman people now see at James's side. Once, she brimmed with ambition, her sketchbooks filled with designs and visions of fabrics she dreamed of bringing to life. In college, she had been celebrated for her talent, her professors urging her to pursue a career in fashion or interior design. She imagined herself in a bright studio surrounded by color, creating work that reflected her spirit. But when she married James, her dreams began to shrink, piece by piece. At first, she told herself she was making small sacrifices for the sake of their partnership. Passing up an internship abroad so James could focus on building his law career seemed reasonable. Declining a freelance opportunity so she could help entertain his colleagues felt like part of being a supportive wife. But as the years went by, those sacrifices became her reality, her own aspiration buried under the weight of his. What had started as compromises became erasures. Now, when Elena looks at her reflection, she struggles to recognize the woman staring back. Someone who once had so much life and creativity, now reduced to quiet routines and social performances designed to uphold James's image. Her world is pristine but hollow, like a beautifully staged house with no warmth inside. James has cultivated a reputation that makes it nearly impossible for Elena to challenge him. To the outside world, he is the model husband, a successful lawyer, admired for his courtroom brilliance. respected for his generous involvement in local charities. His name appears in the community newsletter, praised for sponsoring fundraisers or donating pro bono hours. Neighbors see him mowing the lawn on weekends, smiling at passersby, holding Elena's hand as though nothing in their marriage could be wrong. He even speaks of her with affectionate pride in public, crediting her for his successes, calling her his rock, but at home that warmth evaporates. His support is performative, not genuine. He measures her life against his needs, controlling her choices in subtle, suffocating ways. He dismisses her opinions with a polite but firm tone, reminding her that his career provides for them both. He insists her old friends, like Maya, were bad influences who didn't understand the demands of their marriage. To outsiders, he is generous and steady, a man any woman would be lucky to have. But to Elena, he is emotionally absent, cold, and unyielding, a man more invested in maintaining the illusion of perfection than in nurturing the truth of their relationship. Caught between who she once was and who she is expected to be, Elena now feels like a ghost inside her own life. Every morning she goes through emotions that look perfect from the outside, preparing James's coffee, arranging their home for guests, dressing in ways he approves of, but inside she is shrinking. Her mother, though often charmed by James's politeness, occasionally catches fleeting signs that something isn't right. Elena's distant smile, the heaviness in her voice. But whenever concern is voiced, James quickly steps in with charm, disarming suspicion before it can take root. Her closest friend, Maya, once her confidant, has drifted away entirely, discouraged by James's subtle disapproval and Elena's reluctance to push back. But no one left who truly sees her. Elena feels invisible, reduced to a role in James's carefully constructed image of the perfect couple. She is haunted by the knowledge that if she ever dared to break free, she would risk not only his wrath but also the disbelief of everyone around her. What she feels is not just loneliness, but entrapment, the knowledge that the bars of her cage are invisible to the outside world. To others, she is lucky, loved, secure. To herself, she is trapped in a life that no longer belongs to her. It begins on an ordinary evening, kind of night where Elena expects nothing more than the quiet hum of James's routine. He has left his phone on the kitchen counter while stepping out to take a call on the patio. Normally, Elena avoids touching his belongings. James has always made it clear that privacy is a one-way street. Hers is negotiable. His is untouchable. But something about the vibration of his phone, the glow of an incoming message, pulls her gaze. She hesitates, battling guilt against instinct before finally picking it up. What she finds is not the casual exchange of a flirtation, but something darker. A string of carefully constructed messages to another woman. At first, the words are drenched in the same charm he once used on her, compliments, sweet reassurances, promises that she is different from the others. But as she scrolls, the mask slips. His tone shifts into manipulation, cutting her down subtly while pulling her closer. It is disturbingly familiar. Elena sees herself in every line, realizes that what she mistook for devotion in her own marriage was nothing more than a practiced performance. Her stomach twists with both betrayal and clarity. The man she trusted has been rehearsing these tactics for years, perfecting them not for love, but for control. The illusion of her marriage begins to fracture before her eyes, and for the first time, Elena cannot convince herself it's just in her head. When James returns, Elena is waiting, the phone in her hand trembling. She doesn't yell, doesn't accuse. Her voice is low, steady, asking him to explain what she's seen. For a brief second, his expression flickers, the mask of charm cracking under the weight of exposure. But almost instantly, he recovers, his voice calm, even patronizing. He doesn't deny the messages, doesn't apologize. Instead, he twists the conversation into a weapon. He tells her she's paranoid, that she's reading too much into playful words, that she's always been too sensitive. He reminds her of all he provides, the house, the security, the social standing, and frames her discovery not as proof of his betrayal, but as evidence of her ingratitude. You should be lucky, he says, voice laced with cold certainty, to have a husband like me. His tone makes it sound less like reassurance and more like a warning. Each word strikes at Elena's core, not because she believes him, but because she recognizes the pattern. This isn't the first time he's rewritten reality to suit himself. It's simply the first time she can no longer ignore it. In that moment, she understands that the man before her will never admit fault. never see her as anything more than a reflection of his control. Standing in the aftermath of his gaslighting, Elena feels something inside her fracture. The affair itself is painful, but what cuts deeper is the realization that the betrayal is not about desire, it is about power. The same charm he uses to dazzle neighbors, to earn praise from colleagues, to seduce this other woman is the same charm he once used to draw her in. And beneath it all lies nothing genuine, only a hunger to dominate and control. She sees now that the marriage she has been defending, the image she has been preserving, was built on lies from the start. The man she thought she knew never truly existed. For years, she convinced herself she was loved, valued, essential to his life. Now, with his words echoing in her ears, she realizes she was only ever another role in his performance. The weight of this truth crushes her, but it also sparks the faintest ember of defiance. If the world she knew was nothing but an illusion, then she no longer has to protect it. The question, sharp and terrifying, presses at her. Does she keep playing her role as the silent, lucky wife everyone envies, or does she risk everything to fight back? In this moment, Elena steps across an invisible line. Her world has collapsed, but in the ruins lies the possibility of something she hasn't felt in years: freedom. After Elena's failed confrontation, Dane senses the subtle change in her demeanor, the way her smiles no longer reach her eyes, the quiet hesitation in her voice, the distance she tries to create. Instead of addressing it with genuine care, he responds by tightening his grip. He begins monitoring her phone, insisting it's for safety or trust, but Elena knows it is surveillance disguised as concern. He comments on her every move, criticizing her choices in clothing, her attempts at conversation, even her silences. Any flicker of independence, a walk alone, a moment spent on her own projects, is met with sharp reminders about loyalty and the dangers of making him look bad in public. "Don't embarrass me," he warns, his tone calm but laced with a threat she cannot ignore. The walls of her life close in tighter, each day shrinking the space she has to breathe. To the world, James remains flawless, the devoted husband, the charitable lawyer, the man whose reputation is untouchable. But within the home, Elena feels the invisible chains of his control grow heavier. She begins to understand that his fear is not losing her love, but losing control of her narrative, the image of perfection he so carefully crafted. This realization terrifies her, but it also sparks a dangerous thought. If his control is rooted in fear, perhaps there is a way to weaken it despite the risks. Elena begins to carve out small acts of rebellion, fragile threads connecting her to the woman she used to be. She finds the courage to secretly reach out to Maya, her estranged best friend. Their first conversation is awkward, heavy with the silence of years lost. But when Maya's warm voice fills the line, Elena feels a flicker of life returning. She also rediscovers her sketchbook, hidden away in the back of a drawer. Late at night, when James is asleep, she sketches quietly by the faint glow of a lamp. Her lines are hesitant at first, as though her hand has forgotten the language. But soon the pages fill again with shapes, colors, dreams. These moments are small, almost invisible, yet they carry immense power. James begins to notice the shifts, the quiet confidence in her eyes, the faint smile when she thinks he isn't watching. His response is subtle but chilling. He cloaks his anger in soft words, framed as concern. He tells her she seems distracted, warns her that people might misinterpret her actions, reminds her of how fragile reputations are. But beneath the polished words, there are cracks, veiled threats, a sharpness in his eyes that betrays fear. For the first time, Elena sees him not as invincible, but as a man whose control is slipping. That awareness steals her and terrifies her, because she knows his charm is both weapon and shield. If it breaks, he may not just lose her, he may expose the monster behind the mask. Maya becomes Elena's lifeline, the anchor she had been missing for so long. Patiently, she listens without judgment, offering both empathy and practical advice. She urges Elena to start documenting everything, the messages, the criticisms, the threats wrapped in concern. If he ever tries to break you completely, Maya warns, you'll need proof. At first, Elena resists. The idea of recording his cruelty feels dangerous, like lighting a fuse she isn't ready to ignite. But the more James tries to corner her, the more she understands the necessity. Each note in her hidden journal feels like an act of defiance, a step toward reclaiming her voice. Yet this secret battle also tears her apart. To expose James would mean shattering the life she has known, the house, the community's admiration, even her mother's belief in her perfect marriage. It could mean isolation, public shame, or worse, retaliation. But silence, she realizes, will destroy her from within. Her soul is already withering in the shadows of his control, and if she doesn't fight back now, there may be nothing left of her to save. For the first time, Elena begins to think not just about surviving, but about resisting. The stakes rise with every choice: stay silent and remain imprisoned, or risk everything for the chance at freedom. This is no longer just about an affair or even a toxic marriage. It has become a battle for her life, her identity, and her soul. After the confrontation about the texts, James notices Elena's subtle detachment. Once she would smile automatically, now her expressions hold hesitation. Once she nodded obediently, now there are pauses that unsettle him. Instead of self-reflection, he chooses control. He begins monitoring her phone under the guise of trust, framing it as a way to keep their marriage strong. Elena learns quickly that every call, every message, even the timing of her online activity, is under scrutiny. Attempts at small independence, a trip to the grocery store alone, an afternoon walk, even lingering too long at the library, are met with pointed comments. James criticizes her clothing, claiming it might give people the wrong idea, and chastises her when she hesitates in conversation at social gatherings. The warnings are always veiled, his tone polished, but the menace is clear. Don't embarrass me. In public, he smiles as if nothing is wrong, the perfect husband draping an arm around her waist. But at home, the criticisms carve into her like a knife, leaving her hesitant and anxious. Elena begins to realize the cage she is in isn't built with locks and chains, but with perception, with his ability to make everyone else believe in the illusion of their marriage. And the more distance she tries to create inside herself, the more he tightens his grip. Despite the suffocating control, Elena begins to carve out fragile rebellions. She reaches out to Maya, her once close friend whom James had subtly driven away. Their first meeting is tentative, marked by years of distance. But Maya's embrace is warm and grounding. For the first time in years, Elena feels seen, not as James's wife, but as herself. The reconnection stirs something long dormant: courage. At night, when James sleeps, Elena pulls out her old sketchbook from the back of a drawer. Pages are dusty, the pencils blunt, but as she sketches, shaky lines transform into fluid shapes. Her hands remember, and with each stroke she feels her identity returning. These quiet rebellions are small enough to escape James's notice at first, but not forever. He begins to comment on her distractions, cloaking his control as concern. You've been distant. Elena, people might think you're unhappy. That's dangerous for both of us. His smile is soft, but his eyes burn with warning. For the first time, Elena sees his cracks, the controlled mask slipping. His fear that her independence might unravel the facade. That realization empowers her in secret. He is not invincible. He is terrified of losing the narrative, and in that terror she begins to sense her leverage. Maya becomes Elena's lifeline, offering not just friendship but strategy. She urges Elena to start documenting James's behavior, his criticisms, his subtle threats, the gaslighting disguised as care. At first, Elena resists. The thought of turning her private torment into written evidence feels like betrayal or worse, an invitation for escalation if James discovers it. But the more Maya insists, the more Elena sees the necessity. Silently, she begins a hidden journal. Every cruel remark, every moment of surveillance, every manipulation is recorded. It is both terrifying and liberating, proof that her reality is not imagined, that her suffering has shape and weight. Yet the act leaves her torn. To expose James would mean destroying the life she has built, the home, the social standing, even her mother's belief in her perfect marriage. It would mean confronting the community's adoration of James and likely enduring their disbelief. But silence feels more dangerous now. Silence would mean letting her soul erode under the weight of his control until nothing remains. In this conflict lies the heart of her transformation. For the first time, Elena begins to weigh freedom against survival, dignity against safety. The tension grows unbearable, but with Maya's support and her own quiet rebellions, the seed of resistance is planted. Elena is no longer only surviving, she is preparing to fight. The night of the charity gala is staged like every other event. James dominates, lights glittering against crystal chandeliers. music swelling with elegance and an audience ready to applaud the man they believe to be flawless. Elena stands at his side, dressed in the gown he chose for her, smiling in the way she has rehearsed 1,000 times. He introduces her with the same charm, calling her his partner in everything, presenting her as the symbol of his perfect home life. To the crowd, they are untouchable, the epitome of love and success. But behind her poised exterior, Elena feels the weight of her secret journal in her purse, the hidden rebellion that has carried her to this moment. As James takes the stage to deliver his speech, she slips toward the edge of the room, her breath heavy. Then she hears it, his voice, lowered but not enough. On the phone, just before stepping up to the microphone, James makes casual, confident promises to the other woman. He speaks of future plans, dismissing Elena as nothing more than a necessary accessory. The sting is sharp, but it doesn't break her. Instead, it hardens her resolve. For the first time, she sees the setting not as his stage, but as hers. As James begins his speech, words dripping with practiced sincerity about integrity, family, and devotion, Elena steps forward. Her heels echo against the polished floor, pulling the attention of the audience. Calmly, without raising her voice, she interrupts him. The room falls silent. She does not scream or rage. Instead, she dismantles him with precision, naming the lies he has woven, the manipulation he has inflicted, and the betrayal he has hidden. She speaks of the gaslighting, the control, the suffocating cruelty that thrive behind closed doors. Every word cuts through the illusion he has worked so hard to protect. The audience stares, stunned, torn between disbelief and dawning recognition. James tries to interrupt, to laugh it off as hysteria, but the tremor in his voice betrays him. Elena stands firm, her hands steady, her voice unshaken. For the first time in years, she is not performing his version of her life. She is speaking her truth in front of the very people who once only saw his mask. The silence that follows her words is louder than any applause James has ever earned. Before James can reclaim control, another voice rises from the crowd. The other woman, the one Elena read about in the messages, steps forward. All eyes snap toward her as she confirms Elena's story. Her own experience is echoing the same manipulative patterns. Her presence transforms Elena's claims from private grievance to undeniable truth. The room shifts, admiration turning to suspicion, whispers to judgment. The facade James built for years, the perfect husband, the generous lawyer, the community's darling, collapses in real time. This carefully curated mask is ripped away not by scandal whispered in corners, but by the undeniable testimony of two women standing together in the light. The very stage he claimed as his own becomes his downfall, and the applause he sought turns into silence heavy with betrayal. For Elena, the moment is not just about exposing him, it is about reclaiming herself. She no longer hides, no longer plays the part assigned to her. She stands tall, the power shifted completely. James is left stripped and small, his charm useless against the truth now laid bare. In that moment, Elena is not the broken wife he tried to silence. She is the woman who shattered his illusion and reclaimed her voice. In the days following the gala, James's carefully polished empire begins to crumble. The law firm that once praised him as a rising star now distances itself, quietly issuing statements about integrity and internal review. His clients pull away, unwilling to associate with a man whose personal life has become a scandal splashed across whispers and screams. Neighbors who once greeted him with warm admiration now avert their eyes, their conversations clipped and uneasy when he passes by. The community, once his stage, becomes his courtroom, and the verdict is delivered in silence and suspicion. He tries to repair the image, crafting explanations, dismissing Elena's words as exaggeration. But the damage is irreversible. For the first time, James is no longer in control of the narrative, he is its subject. The very admiration he thrived on becomes the absence he cannot endure. His name, once a badge of honor, becomes a weight he cannot shake. And in that unraveling, Elena sees something she never imagined possible. James diminished not by her silence, but by her truth. While James spirals in the collapse of his false perfection, Elena begins the slow, deliberate process of healing. She moves into a modest apartment, small, nothing like the pristine house she once kept, but filled with light, space, and possibility. For the first time, the walls feel like hers, not a stage set for appearances. She reopens her sketchbooks without fear, her drawings now more vivid, more daring, infused with the raw honesty of her journey. She begins taking small commissions, her work spreading quietly through word of mouth, her talent finally being recognized for what it is. Each sketch, each design becomes a reclaiming of her voice, a rebuilding of the identity that had been buried beneath years of silence. She still carries scars, the echoes of James's words linger. The habit of second-guessing herself isn't gone overnight, but those scars no longer define her. They become reminders of strength, markers of survival. The life she's shaping is not grand, not flawless, but it is hers. In its imperfection, she finds freedom. Maya returns not just as a friend, but as an anchor, reminding Elena of the importance of being seen, heard, and believed. Their bond, once frayed, is now stronger, stitched back together by honesty and shared resolve. Elena's mother, too, shifts. The doubts she once carried dissolve after witnessing the truth at the gala. Instead of offering polite but distant concern, she stands firmly by Elena's side, a source of unconditional support. For the first time in years, Elena feels surrounded not by judgment or expectation, but by people who believe in her. This foundation allows her to see that leaving James was not merely an escape from pain. It was a rebirth. She is no longer the woman who hid behind practiced smiles and rehearsed laughter. She is someone new, someone stronger, someone who fought to reclaim her voice and succeeded. The journey ahead is uncertain, but for Elena, uncertainty is no longer terrifying. It is liberating. She is not just surviving, she is living, creating, and becoming. As the light fills her new home, illuminating the sketches that line her walls, she knows this truth. She did not lose everything. She finally found herself. Months later, Elena steps into a sunlit gallery where her designs are proudly displayed on white walls. The air is warm with conversation, footsteps echo softly on polished floors. The scent of fresh paint mingles with the faint aroma of coffee from a nearby table. Her work hangs in frames, bold strokes of color and intricate patterns that speak of both pain and freedom. For the first time, strangers stop, lean closer, and whisper to each other not about who she is married to, but about the beauty of her art. She watches as a woman traces the air with her finger, outlining a sketch Elena drew during one of her darkest nights. Another man quietly nods with admiration, jotting something into a notebook. Elena doesn't introduce herself, doesn't need to explain. She simply stands among them, letting her creation speak for her. It's the moment she once thought impossible, to be seen as herself. Not as James's wife, not as a shadow, but as an artist, as Elena. And in that quiet recognition, she feels the closing of an old wound, the final thread of silence breaking away. That night, as the showcase draws to an end, Elena slips outside for air. The city hums around her, neon lights flickering, taxis rushing by, life pulsing endlessly forward. She opens her purse to retrieve her phone and finds it, a letter handwritten, familiar script looping across the page. James's words plead with apologies, promises of change, and veiled charm designed to tug at her heart. Once, these words would have disarmed her. Once, she would have clung to the hope in them, desperate for the man she thought she loved to return. But now she sees the manipulation between the lines, the way he wields remorse as another chain. Elena breathes deeply, her hand steady as she tears the letter in half, then into smaller and smaller fragments until it is nothing but paper confetti. She lets the pieces scatter into the night wind, drifting like ashes carried far beyond her reach. For the first time, she feels no pull to reply, no ache of guilt. Just release that when Elena steps back into the gallery, the lights glow golden, casting her work in a warm radiance. Crowd is still alive with chatter, a gentle hum of appreciation wrapping around her like music. She doesn't stand on a stage, doesn't make a speech, doesn't seek applause. She simply exists, and that is enough. Her reflection catches in the glass of one of her framed sketches, and for a moment, she studies the woman looking back, shoulders unburdened, eyes alive, lips curved into a soft, quiet smile. It isn't the smile of perfection or triumph. It is the smile of ownership, of peace. Her life is not flawless, nor is it free of challenges, but it is hers. Every line she draws, every step she takes forward is chosen, not forced. The mask James once forced her to wear is gone. In its place, Elena stands whole, her true self finally alive.